So today we are in conversation with Mr. and Mrs. Rohinton and Roshan Vivetna, or as the world likes to know them, Rohinton Uncle and Roshan Auntie. We learn a little about their childhood, their journey together, and then their contributions to the world. Roshan Auntie, may we please start with you? Tell us about your journey in India, growing up in India.
Thank you very much, Karishma. Very nice of you to give us this opportunity to talk to you. Well, uh, I I was born in 1939, which is a long time ago, and I had a very comfortable, privileged school life. Came from very old, established families. My father family were the Patels. And my father used to say, we are the double L Bala Patel.
Huh?
Because uh, my father's father in the 1600s, in the 1600s,
Mhm.
was Rustamji Dorabji Patel, was the first Parsi to arrive in Bombay in 1640.
That's
And so we're very proud of that. And then there was Kawalji Patel Street named after the Patels in Bombay. So we always spoke very proudly of our ancestry. On my mother's side, we are related to the Pandes. My mother was a Pandey, Kawalji Pandey, and he was in on somewhere on the family tree. We have the Pitits, and through the Pitits also connected to Baba, Homi Baba. So my grandmother used to live in Pandey Bungalow, which is in Tardeo area, and it is now the bus station. There was an old, very large old bungalow there, and it has now become the bus station. And I grew up at Gwalior Tank Road, above the post office, and then we moved to Sahir Bungalow, which is on behind Sahir Atyari. So in Gwalior Tank Road, I grew up there very uh, in those days. There was no phone calls. I was the only child. I was the only child among three. My two uncles and my father were three sons, and between them we all lived together. And I was the only child, very spoilt, very privileged. I had a full-time ayah taking me everywhere to school and back. Went to Queen Mary High School, and I had a few friends in the bungalows nearby. So there were no telephone calls, no text messaging, no computers, no IT, no. So my ayah, when would go out in the evening with friends, my ayah would take a note to my friend Katie. And she would write back and say, yes, let's meet at 6 o'clock at Scandal Point. We used to go to Scandal Point for our evenings. And then there was one phone on the first floor of the building. We lived on the second floor. And they were the only apartment family that had a phone in the whole building. So, very urgent messages, they would take our phone call and they would trap us from the window and say, telephone, Roshan never a telephone ayo. So we would run down and pick up the phone from there.
so. What sort
So
of a student were you, Auntie?
okay, so I went to Queen Mary's High School, and I was a very, very smart student. I was head girl of the school, and my father and was an architect in the military. So then after schooling, I went to Elphinston College,
What
Elphinstone
did you
College.
study there?
I studied physics. That I did a BSc in science, and my main focus was physics. And there was one physics teacher that really inspired me. I was the only two girls in the whole physics class, and they really inspired us. They, the, the, I forget his name now, but he was the one, and he spoke so he excited me so much about atomic science and yeah, and
You've gone
how
on to have an absolutely stellar career and then influence and inspire others, including myself. Tell us
thank
a
you.
little bit about your scientific career before we
So
then move to Uncle's childhood.
So after my Elphinstone College, I got a job at Atomic Energy Establishment in Trombay, a small job in the radiology department, and I just was so excited that I was able to work there in the Atomic Energy Establishment. That was the forefront of science, atomic science at the time, in 1960s, and we had one big room full of the CDC 3600 computer. It filled the whole big room. And then what we would do was we would load the Fortran program on a tape, load it on a tape into the computer, and then all our programs were on punched cards. So we would load the punched cards, a big box full of punched cards, into the computer, and then really wanted to study further. So I got admission at the University of Pittsburgh, got a master's in nuclear physics from the University of Pittsburgh. And then more exciting was in 1962, I applied for a job at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in the nuclear physics experimental department. And I was most inspired by Homi Bhabha, who was a distant relative, but I did not approach him for the job. I got it on a cold call. Uh, but Bhabha was my inspiration. He was not only an artist, not only a scientist, he was also an artist. He had in his house a rose garden of exotic roses that he would transplant and develop. And I used to visit Mera Baba, his mother. And when Homi Baba was out of town, I would go to his house to stay with Mera auntie, and it was a different lifestyle. It was, she would sit at the end of this big dining table, and the servants would serve her food, and it was just a different lifestyle altogether.
Prince Philip.
And Prince Philip, when he had visited India, they
Hmm?
had a party for Prince Philip in their
Which
yard.
year was this, Auntie?
Must be in the 1960s.
And what do you remember about that event?
1960s. Well, I was not at that event.
Actually, what they say.
I was not at that event, but Prince Philip was entertained at Homi Baba's house in the yard, and they served khichdi and sauce. And they had a
Wonderful.
they had a chef called Reginald who made delicious food. But for example, for the prince, they served tareli makne, a khichdi no sauce. Khichdi
Okay, we'll
and
take a break there, Auntie, and come back to your educative journey in a little while. Let's now move on to Uncle, Rohinton Uncle. Tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, what influenced you and inspired your studies.
Yes, I was not as privileged as Yoshan. Grew up in a very modest family, and I was born in 1934, and not too many people can boast of being born in a palace. That was the Masina Hospital. which was Sassoon's palace, uh, and he had given it to Dr. Masina to run the hospital. So I was born there, and remember going to school. First day of school, I still remember crying and all that sort of thing. Sitting on the three-legged stool that they had, and that was at age 3 in the Montessori. They had Montessori school, and the smaller school was called Runtan Baria School, and it was for boys and girls until age until the first standard. So I was at that school, and very privileged in the sense that the teachers were, of course, all Parsis, and they gave us very good education. Wonderful teachers and wonderful memories. So caring, loving, and
And were you a fun-loving child? Was there any funny incident in your life that you can remember? This was in
well,
Bombay, right?
that one incident about coming back from school for lunch one afternoon. Uh, I was bitten by a monkey. There was a monkey sitting on the agyari
Uh-huh.
wall next to the agyari with my grandparents. So I got a little scared, started to run, and the monkey ran after me and bit me in the rear. Uh, and then, of course, had to go to the Hafkin Institute where they gave me 14 shots in the stomach, very painful.
So is this when you learned not to run from difficult situations, but it would be better to face them head on?
Yes, yeah, perhaps.
And then what happened to the monkey afterwards? Did it
Well,
still
the
around or did they get rid of it?
whole colony was infested with monkeys, and we couldn't get rid of them. And finally, a person came, and I remember built a cage in the compound, Agyari's compound, and the monkey started to come into the cage, and he would take them and release them somewhere. But within about 2 or 3 weeks, all the monkeys were gone.
So
And
there's another lesson. How would you paraphrase that lesson for us?
well, I don't know, perseverance, and keep at it, and something happens. I think providence is what I'm very strong about. There has been providential help, sort of somehow, somewhere, you get things done. And
And this has gone through your life as a lesson that you have seen working for you, perseverance, and also you've inspired lots and lots of other people in the world through all the work you've done. But we'll come back to that. Let's now move on to how you and Auntie met. Where were you? What did you study? And then when did you meet Auntie?
yes, we met through, well, how we met. My sister and Roshan's mother worked at disabled children's facility. Yeah. And they were volunteers and they worked there. So they were together and they must have had some conversation about marriage and so on. And my uh, sister said, I have a brother and a daughter and so on, and we got together. So that's how we met. But Roshan can talk about that more freely.
Yes, we'll ask Auntie to tell us a little bit about that. Go ahead, Auntie Roshan.
Yeah, so, yeah, so Rohinton Okay, so one day, uh, my mother told me that my friend's son is just coming here for a few days from Calcutta and Wellington, and I said, sure, we can meet. So the whole family, their whole family, and Wellington's whole family, and my family, we met. They came to our house for tea, and I dressed up in my best dress. But so they came and we met for tea, and everything worked out fine. And the next day, Roynton sent me a bunch of red roses and says, "You want to go out? We'll walk down Cuff Parade." Or, what was that?
Yeah,
Cuff Parade. It was called Cuff Parade, where there's the seashore. So we took a walk there, and then pretty soon uh, he proposed to me. And so on, we met on December 11th. A tea party was on December 11th, and he proposed to me, and then we got engaged on December 25th. And in that time, he had applied for a training visa to come to USA. So his visa came through. And that was the impetus, because there was a decision whether he should come alone to USA and then we would wait and get married, or should we get married in a hurry and both go to USA together. So we decided to get married in a hurry, and so we
the
got
third decision was made.
yeah, so we decided to get married, and so we got married on January 15th. And the day after we got married, we were running around trying to get my visa. So the Dastuji said, "તમે લોકો ખાલી visa લેવા પની આજ કે શું?" So anyway, we got married on 15th of January at Kolaba Gyari. But the day before our wedding, 2 days before our wedding, Lal Bahadur Shastri passed away. So we had to really have a very quiet wedding, and there was rationing of food at the time. So very, very small wedding we had with no guests and nothing on the 15th of January. And then we postponed our reception to 23rd of January, and at the Baba DIFR where I was working. And it's a beautiful location right on the seashore, and we planned a very beautiful reception out in the with the catering and friends and family. And we were at the location the night before, when looking at the planning, when the call came that Homi Baba had passed away in a plane crash. So second time our reception was cancelled. Anyway, we're very happy, and then we arrived, and then we our flight back. We got the visa for him and me. Then our flight back was on the 29th of January.
Okay. We'll
So we
stop there
arrived.
for just this moment, and we
That's
want to
fine.
just recollect a few of the lessons from this journey. So the first is decisiveness, persistence, the ability to push through against all odds and somehow still manage to meet deadlines with everything happening and being able to manage through circumstances. Would you say that would summarize your journey and
Beautiful,
tips to other people?
beautifully summarized.
Stella,
Very.
thank you
Yeah,
both for being. Yes, Uncle.
she was the
So, Rohinton Uncle, Roshan Auntie, let's now take a little break from the journey we've had so far and focus on Uncle Rohinton's academic journey and holistic development. Uncle, tell us what motivated and inspired you in your journey.
okay. Well, I from Wadiawata High School, I went to Don Bosco High School. which I've heard recently that is the second best school in India these days. But we did not recognize the value of the education that we were receiving at that time.
Mhm.
Very dedicated teachers and very fine education. The padris were our guardians, sort of, and took good care of us. But through those years, also was active in Cub Scouts, and I always somehow attained a leadership role. I became sixer, senior sixer, they called it, for the Cub group. Then Scout, I became the Scout troop leader. I used to run camps, took boys on hikes, many hikes, almost one or two every other month or so. We would go out hiking in the woods. Those years, all those areas that you see all developed, Jogeshwari and this and that, Pirpam and all those were all woods. So we would hike in those areas to Matharan and Lonavala and all those. Took cycling trips on bicycle, going all the way to Pune from Bombay and back. One time we even went to Mahabaleshwar on our bikes. So I would arrange those kinds of trips, and very frugal. We would. I did not have any money, and therefore I could not afford any luxuries. So I would get people to bring rations, mostly from home, and cook. Uh, so our costs for trips would be very small, hardly nothing. Just travel maybe to a railroad station, and then we would go out hiking in different places.
So this is when you actually learnt or brought out your skills, your talents in guiding and bringing out the best from other people. Something
Yes,
that has lived with you throughout your life.
I would say so. Yes, I would kind of be a leader, but at the same time, I would kind of not be recognized as one, and just bring people together and do things together.
So, what we
That,
now term the quiet leadership model.
yeah, I would maybe sum it up that way. Uh,
Wonderful.
so we had lots of fun in those days, and our inspiration were our club leaders and scout leaders. They were grand people. Uh, Learned a great deal from them. Leadership and motivation and so on and so forth. So those were very great people. So, school years were, I wasn't a brilliant student or anything, but managed to get through each year somehow. You uh, kind of don't pay too much attention in the classroom, but at the end of the year, you kind of study hard for a month or so and get through. So that was my style. And uh, for the SSC, there were prelims, and in the prelims, I made miserably, absolutely red marks all over. But they let me through. So, and they're usually 3 or 4 months before the finals. So I decided to study hard.
So that was the sort of when you made your mind up to do something, you did it very well.
I did that, and it was an achievement. I was three people who had distinctions. I was one of the three that passed with distinction, first class and honors or something like that in the SSC exam. So then I decided Ruya College was next door, so I was going to Ruya College. A friend of mine said was stupid not to take advantage of the good grade that you got. So you should go to a better school. And I said I could. don't want to do that. He forced me. He took me to Saint Xavier's, and I was admitted there, which was kind of a turning point in my life. And with that, I was able to attend NCC. They only had the NCC air wing at Elphinstone and Saint Xavier. So I was able to join that, and I got some leadership role in NCC as well. So did 2 years of science, into science at St. Xavier's, and then went to engineering college.
And what did you study? What branch of engineering, and how did
Mechanical
that
engineering.
influence the next part of your journey?
So mechanical engineering first year went to Anand, where the in Gujarat. That was a cultural kind of shock because we grew up as in the Parsi community with Parsi friends and so on and so forth, and then now all of a sudden you were in a different culture. One funny story: I would did not have too much money, so I would only eat once a day in the mess, one meal a day, and I would fill myself up, so that it lasted me for a whole day. Uh, and my roommate was a Parsi gentleman, Parsi boy, who'd grown up in Gujarat. One day he comes to me and says, Allah, isu tame karo cha, brother, what feel which kedame behate couch. You're eating with both hands. So I kind of realized I was breaking bread with the chapati with two hands, and they don't do that. So that was something that I learned. You had to eat with one hand, and if you touched the pot, the ladle that they served in, and I would accidentally touch it on this kind of thing, so they would throw the whole pot away. Those kinds of things, and the Gujarati that they spoke was very different from ours. So those kinds of things were interesting. Then the next 2 years I went to Baroda High School, Baroda Engineering College. Uh, and first year we lived in a attic, me and one other Parsi boy, Tintin Buhariwala. We lived there in an attic with cow dung floor and no bathroom. We had to travel somewhere to go to the bathrooms. So, but spent uh, good times there for the first year. And the second year, I joined the hostel there. That was the Maharaja's stables. They converted the stables into the hostel, so we stayed there. So went through the engineering college and had a mind to go abroad for further studies. So I got admitted to Michigan University in US and UCLA, Los Angeles. Also Imperial College, London. I chose Imperial College, and that was a turning point. If I had come to USA, my life would have been very different. So those days there was no air flights. You had to voyage, sea voyage, and sailing times were not as you would please. You have to take whatever you got, and I had to take a boat that was getting me to London 2 months ahead of opening.
So, did you
College
get a
opening.
scholarship to go to Imperial College?
Yes, yes, RD Setna
Ah,
and several other little scholarships, Parsi Panchayat and so on and so forth. Several scholarships, but they were small amounts, not a whole lot. Altogether, maybe about 10,000, 12,000 rupees or something like that. So got to London, and since there were 2 months ahead of opening, I did some work for a couple of weeks, and I got fired from that situation for for
You
checking
got,
out.
you got fired.
Yeah, for checking out early one Saturday. A friend of mine who actually got me that job said, "Well, I need you to do this or that or something," and he said, "Check out." And he had worked there before, so I checked out, and the boss saw that I had checked out early, and he said, "That's not permitted." He just said, "You better leave." So I left. I had bought a bike from the people that I was staying at, and decided to just go on a bike trip to Europe. So traveled to, uh, rode my bike all over. Then coming to Switzerland, I went to France and Strasbourg and into Germany and down to Switzerland. I gave up my bike in Germany, left, and there were youth hostels, so I knew the word in French. Uh, Auberge de Jeunesse was the youth hostel for French in France, but I did not know the word in German, what the German was, a German word for youth hostel. So I ended up staying in. Uh, those were camping places, camping plots. So spent the night in the cold outside and camping plots. Then somebody told me what the word was, youth hostel in German, and Jugenderberg. I remember.
Now you remember.
And those were very fine hostels in Germany, very fine hostels.
So your younger days training in camping and scouting saw you well
And
through this part of your
lost
life.
my passport once. A lot of people those days, hitchhiking was very popular, and people gave you hitches all the time. You would stand somewhere for a few minutes, and somebody would pick you up and take you. So in Switzerland, there was a gentleman who picked me up,
What
uh,
happened to your bike?
and I left the bike in at one of the youth hostels
What?
because the roads were too up and down. In fact, when you're laboring up a hill, somebody would stop and say, "Would you like a ride?" So they'd take your bike and put you in the seat and take you over.
So
So
was this a geared bike?
yeah, it was some kind of a, yeah, must have been, I suppose. One time, a person picked me up. He was a German gypsy, and he knew that I was. I told him I was an Indian, so he started to say a few words like "dat," "boo," those kinds of things. I was surprised. So later, I learned that gypsies use a language called Romanish, and that comes from Kashmiri Hindi. It's very close to Hindi, Romanish. And then in Switzerland, somebody gave me a hitch, and I forgot my passport on the dashboard. I carried a map in a little, so I lost my passport, and then went to the embassy in Geneva. Took several days before I got a passport. They gave me a temporary passport.
So this was now Geneva. And where were you actually heading? So this journey, did you have a
I just
destination in mind?
randomly through Germany, Geneva, and then time was up, so I started to head back, and must have been Hook of Holland, I remember. I returned from Hook of Holland back to London.
Okay, so
And
now your
then,
journey takes you back to London. So the next phase of your journey
yeah,
in London
went to
was,
college and was spent the first year in college. Difficult time, not too much money, couldn't find a job. Worked in the post office for a
and
while.
this course, did it then lead you to America, or was it a completely different
No,
course?
that wasn't that. Then I started applying for jobs, aeronautical jobs in different airline manufacturing, and I must have applied 30, 40 different places, and they would call me for an interview, but no jobs. So money had run out, so I was desperate, and finally, my dad's boss, Englishman, they were all English those days. He had retired and had returned to London. My and he had connections with railroad companies, manufacturing companies, and so he was able to find me a training job in Westinghouse Open Signal. There, I worked for about 2 years or so. I had bought a motorcycle, and then they transferred me. They said, "Well, now it's time to go back and work in India, where they had a branch in Calcutta." So I was sent to Calcutta. I said, "Okay, fine." So I decided to uh, ride back to India on a motorcycle,
Mhm. You
and
rode back from England
from London, yeah,
from London to Calcutta on your motorcycle
to Bombay, yeah.
to Bombay.
And,
Right.
uh, went lots of different things happened on the way. It was midwinter, and I had no choice. I could not pick the time. They wanted me in Calcutta by January or February or something, and it was a month and a half or so. So, nevertheless, I just took the chance and went down. Austria, I learned my lesson uh, the hard way of riding on ice. First time in Germany, near Munich, the roads were icy. I did not recognize I'd slipped, and but fortunately nothing happened. Just kept slipping and kind of recovered, and then rode the uh, rode the motorbike with uh, learned the hard way. So rode the motorbike with 2 feet on the road.
On the road.
Yeah, to balance, yeah, slowly at 10 miles per hour through
So was
the.
this a trait that you then adapted to your future life, being able to
I guess
adapt,
you say
being able
that
to learn on the go, as it were? And
in
how did this
Austria,
influence your journey?
there was snow on the roads and up the mountains passes. They had passes, Austria down to Yugoslavia. Uh, I remember a postman giving me a hand, pushing the bike, and
And so when did you reach Bombay finally?
down into Yugoslavia. It was pretty good in Yugoslavia. Then into I did not reach Bombay. Uh, from Greece into Turkey, uh, there's uh, there's a crossing at Ederney. And yeah, it's I'm sorry, it's
Uncle, life teaches us many lessons, and by sharing this lesson with other people, you're making their journey a little easier. So while it's drawing a lot of energy from you, it has
kind,
helped
kind
us
of
all.
hard, kind of hard for
No, was it in
some.
February? Was it Telegram?
Auntie,
Well,
No, you said
what I recall him telling me is that where was this? In where was this that you got the telegram?
Turkey,
In Turkey.
Ederney
In Turkey.
crossing.
Crossing in Edirne, you had to go through some consulate.
Well, no, at Ederney, the crossing, uh, the guard,
So the guard came to you with a lamp. Yeah, the guard with a lamp came to him and gave you the.
yeah, said that I had to be in.
Where you had to,
Some other time.
you had to what?
so Auntie, we'll take a break over here and just ask you to repeat that last part. So the
Yeah,
guard came with the lamp.
I thought I recovered myself, but he asked me to report to Istanbul as soon as possible. So it was night time, so I drove all through the night and got to Istanbul in the morning and went to the embassy.
And then, so at the embassy, what happened? There was a
Auntie,
telegram.
these things happen in people's lives, and being able to talk about them is not easy. And being able to share this so that other people learn from our journeys is probably one of the bravest things we can do in our life. And those people who go through this, who then go on to make other people's lives easier, as Rohinton uncle has done, takes
Yeah,
takes
so
lots of
then
courage.
the embassy person gave me a telegram saying that I was to go back, uh, and there was an airline ticket for me. So I had to decide what to do, and you could not carry your bike because it's not permitted. You had to carry a what they call the white paper or carnet or something, so that you had to keep your possession of the bike and not sell it in any country. So I wasn't able to sell it. So the somebody, a taxi driver that I had hired, he suggested I give the bike away to Red Cross, which I did, and
And
then
did they
just
tell you in the telegram what?
no, they did not tell me in the telegram. They said that something that my brother had met with an accident. So then I flew back. Then a month later, I went to Calcutta.
You can flew back and what was?
Flew back, and when I got home,
So his brother had met with a train accident.
And this
And
was uncle's younger brother,
Jamshed. So
Jamshed.
December 25th, right? Yeah, and he had met with a train accident at Churchgate, Church
Parade.
at Parade, and he had passed.
Rail.
He was.
And he had passed away at that instantaneously.
Yeah. So that was it. I got home and a month later went to Calcutta, stayed at the Dharamsala for a couple of years. Lots of memories of the Dharamsala. Mrs. Jilla ran the place
Uh-huh.
with Iron Hand, and lots of passengers would come and go at the Dharamsala. Lots of funny stories. But managed. I did not. They did not pay me well first, but then I proved myself, and uh, the company had got an order for manufacturing what were called retarders for railroads. First time in India, so they sent me to England again. And I learned how to make them. Came back and built those for the company. Those were used in marshalling yards for marshalling trains, for preparing goods trains for freight trains. So I did that for the company, and then they had several other positions for me: developed foundry, mechanized the foundry for them, and so on and so forth. So they recognized my talents and did very well at the company,
So this
extremely
was
well.
all at the same company in different departments.
Different departments. They would put me in
Um,
different departments.
well,
Managing director who had a eye for me. He had wanted me to marry his daughter, which I didn't care for. But I worked for about 7 years, 8 years in Calcutta. Had good friends, good memories. Family took care of me, paymasters. Every Sunday I would visit them and had some good times. Kati kebab was very much in vogue those days. You would go to have Kati kebab in the evenings of Saturday nights or Sunday nights. Grand Hotel, all these people came and they were singing, crooners were there, and all kinds of things happening. Very nice time in Calcutta.
wonderful.
I learned a little bit of German in Calcutta. And then, of course, when I did well, I got a place for myself. For after the Dharamsala, I stayed uh, in attic on the second on the terrace of a building for about just a small little space, 12 by 12, and then graduated and was able to afford an apartment. So got an apartment and had a servant and had pretty good time for the remaining 3 or 4 years toward the end. And
So
then
which
of course,
years was this, uncle?
sorry,
Which years was this? Which years were these?
from I would say 59 to 58 or so to 66, 1966. And then I'd applied, I wanted to find out how things were in USA. So I'd applied. My brother was here, and I'd applied for a visa. to come to USA through the company that my brother was associated with. Yeah, that is another big story, long story how we got here. But I got the visa, and you heard the story.
Wonderful. That completes that section for today. Thank you for sharing your journey with us, Uncle. Thank you for teaching us to persevere, inspire others, and
Yeah,
learn through difficulties.
yeah. I would hope you'd edit out that little portion where I got emotional.
I
Yes,
think
yes.
that was beautiful to share it with your heart.
Yeah.
Let's just document the date for today. Today is Tuesday, the 11th of May, 2021. And I'll express my gratitude to Mr. and Mrs. Rohinton and Roshan Revetna, and also Mr. Yazdi Tatra for supporting us through this absolutely magnificent journey. Thank you, Yazdi.
Every year.
Uncle Rohinton, it's clear from the lovely story that you told us that Auntie holds a very special place both in your life, your heart, and your work. Tell us a little
Right.
bit more about this.
Yes.
So let me tell you how he surprised me on my birthday. He got up early and I got up a little later. In fact, I got a call from Yasti right around that time. Thank you, Yasti, for always remembering my birthday. So I got up, and then when I came to the kitchen, I was surprised because on the kitchen counter was a little vase with a devo and a beautiful bunch of flowers. And they're not quite in good shape yet so far, but here
How
they are,
beautiful.
still surviving. And, and then there was a card in the vase, and it says, I don't know if you can read it, but it says
My
to my producer, Roshan.
And
And then when I opened the card, this was the poem that Rohinton had written for me.
uncle, may we please hear the poem?
the title is An Ode to My Producer. She's been the force behind. Providence, of course, but the hand behind, no doubt, is that of the producer, constantly gaining my ear and watching every step. Woe befalls for sure for any missteps. So thanks is not enough for all of 50 years. There has to be something more, for the hand behind all my life's work. Let the phantom architect of my life be known. It is no other than my dearest, dearer than life itself, Roshan for sure.
Thank you
Beautiful,
for sharing that with us,
beautiful,
uncle.
beautiful,
That was
beautiful.
so touching.
Yes, after 54 years. So, thank you.
Very
So that's our life story.
Thank you. Thank you.
She, she has been number one.
beautiful.
Yeah. But he has all the ideas. He keeps coming up with
Yes, and
ideas.
in our next section, we will talk about the journey through your ideas and the legacy of lessons learned that you have for all of us. Thank you, Rohinton and Roshan Rivetna, for being the steps upon which we have climbed through so many decades to reach where we are as a global community today.
Thank
And
you.
we'll discover these steps with you in our next section.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
truly blessed to be able to do the work we have done. Uh, it's a privilege. It's been a privilege to be able to, and of course, it's very, very satisfying. So, not too many people have this opportunity that we've had uh, because we came to the US when things were very, very very different in the sense that the community was just growing and people were coming to the United States. So it was kind of crystallizing, and we were there at the right time. With some inspiration, we were able to do things and put things together.
Yes.
And so we were there at a time when these things were possible. So the right time, perhaps at the right place. And we're privileged to be able to serve.
And we are honored to learn this journey from you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you.
Splendid. So, Auntie and
Thanks,
Uncle,
Karishma, for doing this. Thank you.
Karishma,
Uh,
really, it really helps
and
very much when you lead us on.